guilty as charged. I've been posting witchcraft videos here on YouTube since 2012, January to be exact, which means I've seen every single video that's gonna tell you secret hacks or tips or tricks on how you're already a witch or signs you are already a witch. But this one, out of all the videos I've seen, you've never heard my little secret tip I'm giving you today on the oddly specific sign that you're already a witch. So leave a like on the video if you are as excited to hear what that might be as I am to tell you. If you are new here, assalamu alaikum, merry meet, and welcome back to your daily dose of DragonFaether. My name is Azura DragonFaether, the Draconic Priestess, and today I will be your host to share with you an oddly specific sign that you are already a witch, my darling. But yesterday we talked about how everyone deserves dragons, so don't forget to click in the cards if you missed it to make sure you realize why everybody needs dragons. But before we just start rambling, my friends, the answer is clear and super spicy. Are you ready? Drumroll. Yep, you heard me correctly. Well, you haven't heard me yet, but the truth is that the oddly specific sign that you're already a witch is if you were born a woman. That's the video. See you next time. Stay geeky your feet. No, we're gonna break this down today, okay? So today we're gonna talk about how the word witch has been historically used to oppress women, specifically that were leaders, wise, knowledgeable, and spiritually sovereign. And stay till the end of the video so you can hear how we can reclaim this title, witch, and how we can make a difference in changing the tides of history so witchcraft becomes a term of empowerment rather than a term of oppression. So leave a comment down below if you have ever felt othered, if you have ever felt targeted, if you have ever felt suppressed simply for being a woman or born assigned female at birth, right? Pretty much insert any type of identity that wasn't a wealthy man with money. Yeah, if you're not a wealthy man with money, you may be entitled to compensation because you are a witch. Whether or not you agree with it, this is historically accurate. So we have been living in a society for a very long time. And even today, witch is a term that is highly controversial from around the world. And in some countries, in some cases, being even someone who identifies as a witch could get you imprisoned or could get you arrested or worse, unalived, right? So this is why we wanted to crack open this case here, because witchcraft, the term witch, is quite a relatively new term. It's quite a relatively new word, actually. It hasn't been around for many centuries. So this term in particular has been systemically used as a tool of the patriarchy to weaponize women's gifts or the divine feminine against itself. Anything that didn't go along with what these church leaders or what these men in power or the patriarchy, sometimes it was the king or, you know, whoever's like ruling like a state or a country, I should say, whatever they said, however they defined it, is what was reality. That's pretty much how it worked back then. And so this term was used to specifically target people who would cause a questioning or would cause a deviation from the prescribed ideals, the prescribed set of belief systems. And this was to maintain control, power, and influence over the lands and over the people, of course. So this term, witch, was used to literally systemically target people who were women, usually women, that were very wise and knowledgeable. This could be wisdom in anything. This could be education in anything. Even women that were just able to read and write were also targeted and often called witches. This was used to attack disabled people, people who might have what we consider today as mental illnesses. They would use the term witch to claim that they were possessed. However, when a man would express these similar or, you know, likewise type of characteristics that, for example, we might consider like schizophrenia, or we might consider mania, or we might consider a, episode, if you will, These men were treated much differently when they had experiences like this, as opposed to women. Whenever we would express ourselves, we were diminished and silenced because it made the men uncomfortable. This was also used to systemically target people who were literally just expressing themselves. Any sort of unique identity. If you have a unique identity of your own, or an identity that's not part of the prescribed system or the prescribed binary, you might be entitled to be considered a witch. So this is something that I think we really truly forget. We all know about the witch hunts, and many of us, I don't know if they're still teaching it in school because I'm not in school anymore, but in terms of the education that I received when I was a kid, this is something that we were taught. We were taught about the witch hunts in school and what that kind of looked like and that hysteria following it. And we see a resurgence now, today, of this type of behavior towards the LGBTQ people. And we also see a resurgence of this today towards witchcraft. Literally, specifically witchcraft. And like spiritual practices that aren't considered Christianity or Catholicism, to be entirely specific. And so this was also a term that was used to a woman who was not married to a man, or did not have a male authority in her household or in her particular life, right? Maybe she had a father, right? Maybe she had brothers, but like she wasn't outwardly observed as being tied to a man. And so a woman of sovereignty, or a person who was assigned female at birth, or literally anyone on the LGBT spectrum who was a sovereign being who didn't have these types of relationships, were also systemically targeted as witches. And it still happens today. And furthermore, another thing that was considered witchcraft was having extensive knowledge about plants and herbs in the land. Having an understanding of how to make potions that would heal people, or make salves that could be used as a healing remedy, or if someone came to somebody with an issue, be it spiritual or otherwise, they would prescribe you either a type of steps for you to do, like a cleanse or something like this, or they would prescribe you actual medicinal, herbal remedies, I should say. And these kinds of individuals, even if they were men, were often targeted as witches. And it was also people who were spiritually deviant, in the sense of like, we're just different than the Christian church. We're just different than Catholic beliefs. And yes, we're just different than Islamic ideals. These were all things that were encompassed into being called a witch. And over time, the term witch was mashed together into this visual of this evil person. And by the way, the image of the green witch with her like big nose and the warts on her face and the green skin, this is actually a very anti-Semitic trope, anti-Semitic visual of a witch. And it was intentionally crafted to make people who were not subscribing to the Christian ideals or the Catholic ideals, it was made to other them and demonize them and dehumanize them. Okay, and this is really, really sad, because ultimately, let's get into part 2 of today's video. All of these types of things were out of the control of the men leadership at the time, meaning that these people who, like us now today, who choose to read, like for me, I choose to read the Quran and interpret it as my own, in my own way, and I am entitled to do so. The Quran tells me this. We are entitled to our own understanding of God. And yes, we prescribe to, like the scholars, how they interpret things and, things like that. But ultimately, when I pick up the Quran and I read it for myself, I am able to come to my own conclusions. And this historically was not really allowed or encouraged. Education in particular was systemically targeted, along with the right to practice medicine, the right to own resources like property or businesses or, just wealth, anything like that. As well as the religions, right? These are really the 4 pillars that the patriarchy and men sought to control. And in order to establish dominance within these areas, they used the term and weaponized the term witchcraft into basically saying that any women who stepped out of line of what the men said was okay were immediately demonized, attacked, and many times were even burned as heretics or witches. And while we do more of this research, you know, there is this glorification of the witch hunts, and there is this glorification of like the burning of the witch at the stake. But this like really kind of became a symbolism. While it did really literally happen to some people, it was oftentimes more, you know, these women were captured, or these, you know, people who identified not as a man were captured, and they were tortured, and they were often like SA'd or actually mashalted. I can't say that on YouTube, I don't think, or I'll get demonetized. And they were also R-worded, unfortunately. Many of them were forced into having children, or sometimes sincerely just tortured to their end. And this was to impose the dominance of the patriarchy and of these ideals that the men were instilling into law, into medicine, into religion, into education, and into just the power structures that be within their contextual communities. And the same thing still happens today. And you can see the rise of this targeting of the witches, right? Of these women, of the LGBT people, of people who don't fit the prescribed ideals. You see them being violently targeted right now. And that is because there's never been more of us openly, presently living our lives. We've never had so much visibility in the in like recent human history. Right? The last time that, honestly, like LGBT people and women and, you know, people who were not like high class, like born into wealth men, it's never been a better time to be someone who's not a man, because we have more visibility, we have more access to community, and we have more freedoms to express our identities. And this has truly been a turning point in the history of humanity, because we are collectively waking up to the diversity of human identity. And this is directly challenging patriarchal structures in real time. And the reason why we brought this video to you today is because, one, we see it kind of repeating itself like on the world stage right now, a lot of these things that have historically happened. But also, one thing I would like to mention is that, you know, it was really the pinnacle of it was really the pinnacle of, you know, witch hunts for women who did not have children. And I know that this might ruffle some feathers, but it was the women who were working alone, serving their community, studying, tending the land, creating, you know, like potions or remedies or herbal anything that was able to help their community. It was people helping others have children and helping others pass away, like a death doula or a birth doula. And these people who did not have children of their own were considered a waste of a woman because they were not bearing children. And that was literally the most important part of these societies. And it is still this way today. The most important part of any society is the amount of children that you're having, because that is ultimately what sustains a society. So these witch hunts were truly directed at women to systemically undermine their sovereignty in order to force them into producing children, in order to force them into domestic slavery to take care of the men, so the men could focus on literally domination of the world. And that's why the world looks the way that it does today. So before anyone in my comment section comes for me, the witches and witch belongs to the woman. Witches belong to the LGBTQ community. Witches belong to anyone who does not identify as a man, and I will die on that hill. Well, men can be witches too, right? We're talking about from a historical perspective and why we're going to jump into part 3 of this video. How can we reclaim this? How can we rewrite the story of history? And we're going to start first and foremost with reclaiming the word witch. This is why I identify as a Muslim witch on my channel, though I do not practice sihr, which is often translated to witchcraft or sorcery from the Quranic definition. However, modern day witchcraft is very different from the Quranic definition of witchcraft, which normally means hurting other people, trying to manipulate free will, take people's blessings, summoning spirits to hurt others, calling upon, you know, anything other than Allah. are seeking power outside of Allah, associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those are kind of like what encompasses sihr. But we're talking about witchcraft in the modern era right now, okay? And the way we reclaim that is by taking the word witch and we define it now. We get to define what the word witch means, okay? And this is why it's an oddly specific sign that you might be a witch, because you're reclaiming it today, okay, my love? Especially if you're a woman or you identify with the LGBTQ community, all right? You, my darling, are taking it back today with me, all right? Let us take it on. And this is the reclamation movement of witches, all right? Because we deserve to define our own magic. We deserve to define our own witchcraft, and we will no longer tolerate people using this term to oppress us and our people, because it has happened for far too long. Too many people have lost their lives, and we are done. No more. It ends with us. So now, witches and witchcraft belongs to the women. It belongs to the LGBTQ community and anyone who doesn't identify as a man. And yes, my loves, even if you are a man, you can still be a witch. but you gotta respect us ladies, okay? Otherwise, you're the antithesis of a witch, okay? So, and I quote, you get to define what a witch means to you now. You get to define what magic means to you, and you get to define what witchcraft means. And why is this so revolutionary? Because historically, the word witchcraft and the word witch has transformed and been changing throughout history, pretty much throughout history. And because of this, journey throughout history, when you do your studies, you will see that different communities have like defined witch and witchcraft differently throughout history. And now more than ever, especially with the internet, everybody is kind of redefining what witchcraft and witch really means for them anyway, but now we're going to do that intentionally, okay? And we're not going to go by the definition of witchcraft and witches that's used to oppress people, used to hurt people, used to literally kill people, used to take people's resources and take away their families and take away their livelihoods. We are going to completely delete that definition. Nope, that is oppression, all right? That kind of witch, nope, that doesn't exist here, all right? The term witch, by Quranic definition, since, I am Muslim, I'll be referencing the Quran in this video. And by Quranic definition, is contextually one of harming others and causing deception and illusions and making people believe reality actually isn't what reality really is. Things like this. But it doesn't ban all witchcraft in the modern day terms of witchcraft, right? Many practitioners today don't even practice witchcraft in a bad way. And this is something that I think is very damaging, and we know it is. We see evidence of it. You could study it. That how these words like witch and witchcraft and accusing people of it in a bad way has been used systemically to deny women a seat at the table, to deny anyone in the LGBTQ community a seat at the table. If you were deviant at all from the prescribed ideals, you were considered a witch, and historically have been considered a witch, and in some places even still today would still be considered a witch for this. And this is why we're reclaiming the word. And I want you guys to leave a comment down below. What does witchcraft mean to you? What does witch mean to you? And if you made it this far in the video, leave me a crystal ball emoji so I know you are one of the real ones. Okay, one of the true hatchlings, okay? So please, my darlings, tell me what your definition is. I would love to hear it. I need to hear it. I need to hear how you view magic and witchcraft. And it's only because historically, men in power who have sought to control and dominate and oppress others have been the ones enabled to define witch and witchcraft. And while resources like the Quran will tell us that a witch has an evil connotation or a sinister one or a violent connotation, an aggressive one, right? We have to understand that in today's society that we live in, it is not like that anymore. And most people who are practicing witchcraft are doing it to return to nature. They're doing it to return to their roots of their ancestors whom were oppressed and denied their practices. It's an act of remembrance. It's an act of revolution. And it's an act of the divine feminine rising, which is why we want to hear your definition of witch and witchcraft here on this channel. And unfortunately, there will be many, many people who disagree with this, and you're more than welcome to be entitled to your opinion. Everyone's entitled to their opinions, but you're just wrong, so you gotta be like okay with being wrong. Do you know what I mean? Because you can't deny the history of witchcraft and how it's been used, not as a term to define bad sorcery, or it's not been a term to really identify those who are practicing malevolent things, trying to hurt people and cause illusions or delusions, but instead it has been weaponized against women and LGBTQ people and anyone deviant from the path prescribed by the men in power. That has been what witchcraft was, but no longer. So thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope that you enjoyed so very much, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we will be deep diving into kind of just spiritual secrets, okay? So you're not going to want to miss these spiritual secrets, and you're not going to want to miss how they can help you improve your life in 10 minutes, okay? So don't forget to check out my video about witchcraft, well, my playlist. I have a witchcraft playlist here if you're interested in learning a little bit more about witchcraft, so I definitely recommend starting here. It'll take you to the first video and all of that goodness. And yeah, so until next time, stay geeky, cheeky, and freaky, little Hatchlings! Goodness! Oh my gosh! Oh my goodness, Gaddafi's blessed be. I mean.